Hey, coaches, we got a great guest tonight. Dr. Dbailey is a good buddy of mine. He is at Loris High School, which is down in Myrtle Beach. So not only is he good looking, but he lives in a fun place. And Danny is going to talk about the box squat, but it's not the bigger, faster, stronger box squat. It's a different kind of deal. And Danny, I'll tell you, I was a little. We call this at my place. We call this our secret weapon. But I said, yeah, I need to have them. I might be missing a little detail here or there. So I want a refresher myself. So we'll let everyone else see. But this has been the biggest impact probably of anything you ever taught me was this box squat. So I'm excited to hear you teach it and talk about it, man.
Okay, Joe, thanks for the invite. It's always an honor and a pleasure working with you and doing this. Plus I get to talk to you face to face. So, but I don't know about the good looking part. I may have some people that would argue with you on that one. Well, Joe, I'm going to set my timer because you know I like to talk when it comes to strength conditioning. So I'm going to set my timer here for 20 minutes. We're going to see if we can get it done.
Sounds good.
Joe, what the box squat is done, it is basically modernized or just revamped the whole squat. And what you're doing is you're getting some true transferability of the power that comes from the box squat onto the football field. So what we do is we treat it like a science. And Joe, just for your viewers here, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I was going to try and get for you. So I'm going to pull that up and I'll talk about it a little bit. If you got any questions, Joe, go ahead and ask me, or things that you think the viewers may want to know that I'm not covering, just let me know, okay? All right, Joe. Here we go. Unlocking the power of the posterior chain, okay? The posterior chain to us is comprised of your hamstrings, your glutes, of course, your spinal erector, your lumbar, and your hip flexor, okay? So what we do is we really focus on the posterior chain. In doing so, we do it with box squats. And like you said, Joe, and you are correct, it's totally different than the BFS, because I know you're certified with BFS, Joe. And we kind of had some heated or interesting discussions about the box squat, BFS, and versus conjugate method and whatnot. All right, Joe, some useful terms here. Posterior chain, just like I was talking about, refers to the glutes, the hamstrings, the spinal erectors, and hip flexors. All right. Box, okay? Now, Joe, when you and I worked together, I was doing a 10, 12, 19 box, okay? A 10 by 12 by 19. Now, with that, going back to the video that we did last time on best effort, that's 6 weeks worth of squatting for us right there at each height. That's 2 weeks in the mini cycle, so forth, so on. What I've done, Joe, is I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, kids are a little bigger nowadays, you know? They're a little bit taller. And so to conform to what's being produced as far as a high school athlete, I changed the height of the box, or I changed the dimensions of the box. It goes 11 by 13 by 20, okay? All right, Joe, this is key. It's so vital. I mean, people miss this part of the squat that is so important in developing a high school athlete, more importantly, a high school football player. Joe, we use the box squats for all our athletes. It's a great training tool. All right, there's 2 phases that are part of the useful terms for the box squat. You can see here the eccentric phase. That's the lengthening of the muscle, Joe. So as you're sitting down on the box, you're lengthening your hamstrings, your glutes, your lumbars, and your spinal erectors. You're also sitting down on the box, and I'll get to this in a minute, in a controlled fashion. The concentric phase is a contraction and a shortening of those same muscle groups, all right? Parallel. Everybody has their version of parallel. Well, for us, I'm an old power lifter, Joe, and I don't train power lifters. I just know what parallel is. I've judged. I've also competed for numerous years on the national level. And it's where the hip point breaks the plane of the knee. That's what it is for us, okay? Some people, and it's to each their own. Some people use the top of the thigh parallel to the floor, but we want where that hip point breaks the plane of the knee. All right, the keys, Joe. The boxes guide and train the motor skills of a 12 to 18-year-old. And I brought in the 12-year-old, Joe, because we're big believers in the spring semester for getting the middle schoolers over to start working out at the high school level, up rising freshmen that would happen the following year. All right. Now, this is the thing about box squat. If you break it down into two lifts, which we do, it trains both the concentric and the eccentric power phase of the squat. And it's crucial that you break it down so that these two phases have their own phase, okay, if that makes any sense. All right. Excuse me, Joe. The two best ways of developing explosive and absolute. Now, there's a difference, Joe, with absolute, which is maximal strength. In other words, you put a kid under the bar and you tell him to do 1 rep max. That's absolute strength. Developing explosive strength would be like your vertical jump and your broad jump, okay? All right, how do you do that, Joe? You take a relaxed position overcome by dynamic. Now, dynamic to us, we use the word or the term dynamic frequently in the weight room because that's part of the conjugate method that we utilize. The dynamic position is explosion. We explode off the boxes, Joe. All right. Now, here's the key. This is the breaking point. This is your divider in both phases of the box squat. The static position. That's key, Joe. That's the isometric position. Overcome, or you transition or transverse into a dynamic effort. And we'll get into that, Joe. All right. Doing a static, Joe, when we break, and I'm going to show you something here, Joe, that I do with each of my athletes, not just football, each of my athletes. I have a checklist, Joe, a standards checklist. And I evaluate my kids or students, athletes. I evaluate them every 6 weeks, okay? And I do a hang clean or a power clean checklist. I'll also do it on the box squats. Now, static is when you sit back. Notice I didn't say what, Joe, sit down. We sit back on the box. We sit back. We want those hamstrings and glutes stretched to their just full max. So we sit back on the box. We preach that. Sit back on the box. Do not sit down. When we sit back on the box, Joe, we want our feet spread. We want our toes at a slight 45-degree angle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sit down on the box in a controlled movement. Okay, it's not like descending very slowly, but it's a good pace coming down. We sit back on the box and we get to the box, Joe, and all our student athletes, and I'm transitioning to a new school this year. So that's a big obstacle to overcome. You know that when you take over a new school and they have bad habits or old habits and you're trying to integrate what you believe as far as philosophy. When we sit back on the box, Joe, we're giving a 1/1000 count. Now, when we sit back on the box, everything is locked. We are totally relaxed on the box, but our hamstrings, our glutes, spinal erectors, lumbar, and our hip flexors in a locked position. We're holding that static position. Static means unending of the same. Like you get static on your TV, it means it doesn't change. Now, that phase, the static phase, comes in after the eccentric phase, the lengthening coming down. Sit back on the box in a static position, 1/1000 count, and then we're exploding up, Joe. Our feet don't change. Nothing changes, Joe. We are taking that posterior chain muscle groups, and we are engaging them with as much fast twitch and type 2A muscle fibers that we can get to recruit. All right. Doing static overcome by dynamic will build a great amount of explosive force, production, and absolute strength. You're killing two birds with one stone, Joe. All right. Now, here's the thing we like. It develops reversal strength. Now, you see the little picture there? That's O and D line. Those guys are most affected by reversal strength. And it develops reversal strength from the stress placed on the posterior chain on the descent, and then getting into the static phase where you're in a holding pattern. But understand, Joe, you're sitting on that box. If you're squatting, if I'm squatting, Joe, and I'm squatting 315, I've got 315 plus my body weight that's applicable. I'm sitting on the box, but when I'm sitting down, I am engaged in a static position. I'm not in a loosey-goosey relaxed position. Okay, does that make sense? We're good? All right. Here's what I was talking about. The relaxation on the box divides the lift into two phases. From the box, the key muscles for explosion are relaxed and re-engaged, Joe. That's the whole key. That provides the explosion in the concentric phase of coming up or your ascension from the box. You're overloading the posterior chain, Joe. And when you when we preach sit back and you engage the posterior chain, and we do all kinds of supplemental lifts, straight leg, Romanians, glute ham raises, back raises, even our core. We work all of that. But what we're doing is we're taking the back out of it, Joe. So when we overload the posterior chain, it negates the undue stress placed on the lower quads and the knee joints. Now, you say, well, coach, how do you train your quads? Well, we train with heavy, and a lot of reps with front squats. That's a whole nother conversation. All right, this is the thing I love about it, coach. The depth is 100% consistent at all times. So if Joe measures, and I do the standard checklist with Joe Salas, my quarterback, and I figure out he's best on a 13-inch side, then his depth's going to be the same every time he squats. There's no guessing. There's no reaching. There's no looking for parallel. There's none of that. Okay, I don't mean to knock BFS, and I apologize for the cartoon, coach, but it's not the BFS style where you're light on your feet, you're kind of rocking a little bit, and some coaches teach it different, but to me, that's what BFS is, okay? All right, now, I'm going to stop sharing that, Joe, and I'm going to take you to my standards checklist. All right, you see this, coach? Thumbs up, we good?
Yeah, I see it.
All right, standards checklist. The first thing we're doing, coach, is we're going to talk the getting under the bar, okay? We're going to put our shoulder blades together. You see I got little check marks or little boxes to check off. Your chest is bowed out. What we tell our kids, and I mean female, male, basketball, wrestling, football, all the above, what we're telling them is if I put my finger on your spine, when you go to get under that bar, if you're right in the middle of your shoulder blades, your scapula, you should be able to try and pinch my finger with your shoulder blades. We're going to over-exaggerate bowing the chest out. And here's the crucial thing, coach. You got to have a slight curve in your lower back. Slight curve, okay? And what you're doing is, it's like the new version. If you look up somebody that really understands strength and conditioning and they're doing straight leg deadlifts, it's not really a straight leg deadlift. We put our knees and ankles together and our knees are slightly bent, and we get that slight curve in our back, and we bow our backside out as far as possible to do our straight legs. It's the same principle with the squat checklist. Slight curve in the lower back, elbows down. Elbows come up. Where are you going, coach? You remember, you're going forward. So we preach the elbows down. And it has also helped support the weight on the lower or the mid portion of the traps. All right. The first thing that moves, always, and we scream it, yell it, talk it, love it. We preach it every day. The first thing that moves is not your knees. You're not bending your knees. We're breaking the hips. We're breaking the hips, coach, because that's where it's at. Of course, And then you got the bar placement on the bottom of the traps, depending on the developmental and how much meat they have back there. If they're a well-developed athlete or they're a big athlete, they're going to have a little bit more padding. All right, going back to what I said, slight break in the hips. Second phase, this is on the concentric phase. Okay, excuse me, eccentric phase, coach. I'm sorry. The first thing that has to move is the hips, not the knees. Does the chest remain bowed out when the hips start to sit back on the box? Do the elbows remain down? Do the knees remain behind the shoestrings? We like to tell them, coach, that we want a 90-degree angle with our foot and our shins compared to the floor. We want a right angle. That's what we're preaching. If you're getting your knees over your shoestrings, coach, you're looking at doing more of a quad and a lower back because they have to protagonist, antagonist. They have to complement each other to move a resistance. All right. And then we talk about the head up. Now, everybody's different. Some people look at the top of the rack. We just say that's what our aiming point is. We just say find the lion head. Our mascot's a lion. Find the lion head on the rack, and I want you to focus on that. Now, are the glutes moving back, not down? That's important. That all goes back to with the hips breaking, a slight break in the hips, and then the hips move first. Then the third phase, coach, we're headed to the break, which is sitting back on the box. And we always work with weight that they can control in the first phase. Do we sit back on the box? Do the kids not plop down on the box? Is it a controlled movement? Now, we're not talking about super slow. We're talking about a realistic squat. But these are the key points that we're emphasizing, or I'm emphasizing in the weight room. Did not sit down on the box. Did you sit down on the box? If you did, it's a scratch. Did you rock forward? Did your knees stay behind your shoestring? There's a bar position over the top of the thighs when you sit back on the box, okay? And of course, chest bowed out. And then you can read fourth phase, hips move forward and up off the box. That's what we really train the kids, coach, is when they're coming off the box, they're not coming up. Think about it. We want to engage the hips. The hips are where it's at. So that's the key to a fundamentally sound, very good athlete in any sport. And then do the knees remain behind the shoestrings? Are we coming up butt first? Or are we doing the things that, sorry, coach.
Just keep going. You're fine.
All right. The fourth phase is crucial because they could have a first three good, put her outside. They could have a good 3 phases, and then they get to the fourth phase. And the crucial mistake, and this is something to look for as a strength coach or a coach in a weight room, where do the hips go? Do the hips move forward? We try to tell them to get a splinter in their butt. That's what we try and tell them. Because what we're doing is we want to contract. We want to get all the posterior and chain involved at the same time to develop the explosiveness. Okay. And then I have a little summary down here where I can write notes, and then I talk with the athlete and I let them know what we talked about, and I put this in my file. And then 6 weeks later, I break this out, give them a new checklist, but I'm looking at the new checklist with the old checklist to see what we've done. All right, coach, that's it. But I've got about a minute left. I set my timer for 20 minutes, so I didn't want to overdo it like I did last time. The box squats for us, coach, have been, I mean, when we were at Red Springs together, they didn't know what the heck those boxes were. And we had 170, 160 pound kids squatting 2.5 times their body weight. And it still happened. And there's that, that transferability where it carries that same position we're talking about, coach, on the box. If you lean forward just a smidgen and put your hand down, what are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the trenches. You're an O-line, D lineman. If you don't put your hand down and you're in that position on the bottom of the box, in that static position, you're a linebacker. That's your starting point for our hang cleans. We teach the same thing for our hang cleans. So that's my version of the box squat, coach.
That was awesome, man. I tell you, where you got me was, you had multiple kids over 500 pounds at Red Springs.
Yes.
And, when you talk to anyone else, if they say they got a 500 pounder, they're not getting parallel. And
No, they're not.
You were below parallel and coming off the box, which is twice as hard, I think.
Yes.
Here's troubleshooting because, of course, like I thought, I'm messing up a few things. So, how do you when you get the plop? I usually get it like in beginner kids where they're that last 2-3 inches. They're kind of plopping down.
Right.
What do you do to get past that?
Okay, that's where the 11-inch box side or the 10-inch box side comes in. We're dropping the weight. We're lowering the box to go below parallel. And then, I mean, it's very little weight, coach. We got a spotter. And if it's a kid that's underdeveloped, then we really push the supplementals like the straight legs, the Romanians, the glute drops, because that kind of kid can't do a glute ham raise. So we do the negative. We do the glute drops. I don't know if you remember, we did those at Red Springs because we didn't have a glute ham raise. Mm-hmm. We just put them on the bench at a 90-degree angle, had your partner hold your feet, hands across your chest, and we're trying to give a 10-1,000 count before we touch the bench.
Okay. The second one was I still have kids who are even some good ones that they'll rock forward with their shoulders before to get up.
If they're sitting back far enough, their shoulders are out of the equation because you got the bar over the top of your thighs. Where's the bar when they sit down?
Well, obviously it's not where it's supposed to be, but I'm catching
up.
on.
If you can engage where you're rocking the shoulders, you don't have your butt back far enough.
Okay. So the sitting back instead of sitting down is the part I got to refocus on.
You can rock and you can cheat to come off the box if you're just sitting down, especially if your knees are over your shoestrings.
Okay. So
and then Joe, wide stance, open up the hips.
Okay.
It'll all transfer to a regular stance squat.
Okay. And then the last one, go ahead.
Are you getting an echo?
No, you're good.
Okay, go ahead. Last one.
The last one is for some reason, I was fixated on this idea of being below parallel.
We are.
Okay. So I'm good on that one.
Yes.
Okay.
No, our boxes, when we measure a kid, there's some slight adjustments, Joe. Like you always have those tweeners that are between 11 and 13 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So we take a skinny bumper plate or
a
regular plate and put it on the 11-inch side, and then I got 12 inches.
Okay.
Those are far and few between. I would say the majority of your athletes are going to fall under the 11 or the 13.
Okay.
Was that good, Joe?
No, that was perfect, man. Throw some numbers out because your numbers were always crazy, and I always compare them to like your numbers were real, and anyone else who was spitting those kind of numbers out, it was always when you watch them, it's almost a hack squat. They're not getting anywhere close to parallel, and they're saying, "Oh, it's 500," but yours were going below parallel on a box and knocking out just crazy like video game numbers.
All right. There we are. All right. I'm gonna share something with you, Joe. All right, this was my last max before, we're not recording, are we?
Yeah, we're still recording.
Oh, okay. Well, this was my last max, Joe, before I had my 2 back surgeries and stepped out of football and weight training for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is first period from Carolina Forest. Now that's our JV crew. Are you seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay. First period is our JV crew. Those are JV kids. And these are 9th and 10th graders. And this is parallel. And I've ranked them according to their squad. Now these are 9th and 10th graders, Joe.
And this is the
This
last
was
column is the max.
this was first period, second semester, second max in March 12 of 2018.
And it's
Almost
the right
2
column
years.
is what we're looking at.
Yes, the gray column. The gray column and the yellow column. The first 3 columns is pre-squat, post-squat, and then plus or minus what they did on their second max.
Okay. So
All
we're
right.
looking at, so I'm still struggling here. So,
All right. Can you see? Whoops.
okay, I got you. So the second column is the finish.
Yes. All right. See my pointer?
Right. Yeah.
So Herbert, his pre-squat for February was 385.
Right.
His post-squat on March 3rd, 2018 was 405. He went
Right.
up 20 pounds from his previous squat.
Okay.
Now these are underclassmen, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now I'm going to take you to 4th block. This is our varsity kids.
Right.
And you got to realize their first squat was coming off Christmas break or semester change.
Mm-hmm.
This is our second squat. This is our second max during the course of the semester.
So
Does
you
that make
got
sense?
roughly 15 kids over 400 pounds.
Yes.
And this was the bunch that went to the semifinals that year.
The lower state. Yes, sir.
All right. That's fantastic, man.
Yep. So I'm not saying my guys are better than somebody else's guys. I'm just saying what we did and what I do, as far as that goes, works. Now, going back to the conjugate method, Joe, like I told you, for us, that's three cycles for us. All right. Now, remember we talked about doing hypertrophy training. We do that Wednesday and Thursday. And then when we do hypertrophy training, we do the low box squat with less weight, and we're doing higher reps. And then we really emphasize front squats. We're big on front squats, always have been. And I think that's the key because you're working the protagonist and antagonist at the same time. And you need the quad.
So for if we're not on the spreadsheet, what kind of range percentage wise are we looking at for front squat just to get started on it? Because I haven't been doing a lot of front squats.
You're probably in the mid 50 to mid 60 range.
Okay. 50 to 60. All right.
Now, of course, your heavier guys, the guys that are pushing 400, 500 or 500 pounds, they can handle that, Joe, because you're only talking like 250 to 300 pounds.
Right.
And that's nothing for a 500-pound back squatter.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, Joe, here's the thing that people, and I'll say this, and if you got to wrap it up, I understand. I really appreciate the time. But here's the thing. Here's a good, this is something I learned from when I went to a clinic. I listened to Dave Tate. He was with Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell, the conjugate method. They pretty much made it applicable in American terms as far as lifting weights and so forth, strength training. He said, here's the true test of a strength coach. When you max, are your kids' squats going up, but their vertical jumps aren't? If it's not in relation or correlation to each other, something's wrong with your squat training because you're just training absolute strength. And that's good for numbers, but are your verticals going up? Are your broad jumps going up? That's when you know you're hitting the spot.
That's perfect, man. And
Yep.
how, so you're, every time you max, you're maxing, you're checking
Vertical and broad
vertical
jump.
and broad.
Yes.
You told me that before and I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah. Now I've done it. We've all done it the old fashioned way where you put the ruler on the wall and had to make you tick marks on some athletic training tape.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? Yeah. But I was fortunate. I've been fortunate to use a jump mat. So those were good for us because it was quick and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But if, and I go back and I look at it and I say to myself, if they're not in correlation, I believe in explosive training. We eventually will get to bands, but you know, when I did my dissertation for my doctorate, I wrote the paper on bands,
Mm-hmm.
and my thesis was using the box squat and bands will correlate to a higher 1 rep max in squat and vertical jump. And I think it was 175 kids, and it took a year long to research. But my control group, they definitely went up in their 1 rep max squat and their vertical jump. It was all correlated. It was all correlated. So
Awesome, man.
yeah, Joe, it's great seeing you. I love these opportunities because you know I love the weight room. You know I love it.
Well, I appreciate you doing it, because every time you come on here, it reminds me how much I'm screwing up because I forgot all the stuff you taught me.
No.
So it's always a refresher for me.
Well, I'd love to come back and talk to you again, Joe. You just tell me when and where, and I'll be there, brother.
We're definitely gonna do it, because I'm gonna. Every time I hear you, I'm like, dang, I forgot that. Dang, I'm messing that up. Dang. All right, buddy.
But
I appreciate it.
I'm telling you, sit back on the box in a static position. And here's something we've done before too. It's a great training tool for the hang clean. We use the boxes with our jump boxes, you know, the pad boxes, the big pad boxes they got now. We sit on the box and simulate holding the bar. You can't, because the bar forces you back further than you're naturally going to go. But we do a vertical jump onto the 24-inch side from that position.
Mm,
Yeah, from the box squat position, because we're really working on the type 2A and the fast twitch muscle fiber.
that's great, man.
Yep. Joe, thank you.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.